What's going on, everybody? Welcome in to another edition of Pack a Day Podcast Happy Hour. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL, as it says right there. Thanks so much for joining me. Always appreciate it. Always fun chatting Packers with you guys. It's Friday. Taylor Swift's apparently going to be in town in a couple days. It's Packers Chiefs. There's also a football game being played. Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Chris Jones, a young up-and-coming Packers team. If you haven't been able to tell all week, I'm pretty geeked up just about this entire game. Sunday Night Football. This is I talked with Perry and Alex yesterday. The episode will go live on Sunday as a pregame show, but like just such a measuring stick game for this team. And even if they come up a little bit short, it could be really interesting. And if they are a lot short, well, then it's a learning experience. And man, if they win, that would certainly be very, very fun. So either way, I'm really, really excited for this game, as I think you guys have been able to tell all week. But want to get to your questions. Of course, if you have anything, hit me up in the comments and I will try to get to as many questions as possible. Obviously, any super chats will go to the top of the list and I will get to those for sure. But like I said, try to get to as many as I can. I see Omar's been in here with a variety of different questions. I'll try to spread the love, so I'm not just going over all of these, but I'll start with your first one first, Omar. Do you think the Packers will increase Sean Ryan snaps versus KC? And can you explain why they continue to play JRJ, your worst rated Packer, when Ryan's tape the past 4 weeks looks great? 2 years more under contract. All right. So if I'm being devil's advocate, what I would say is I think the left tackles, both Rasheed Walker and Yosh Nijman, have played better since they started competing with each other at left tackle. I would also argue that Jon Runyan Jr., although still not great and still performing poorly, has played better once this competition has started than what he was prior to that. I will also say that Sean Ryan didn't get playing time before the competition. Now he is, and he's also playing well. So you have three players, Nijman, Walker, and Runyan, whose play has been elevated since they started this competition. And Ryan, who's getting his first snaps, who's also playing well. So in some capacity, all four are doing better, or again, it's our first look at Sean Ryan. And so in some way, shape, or form, this competition, whatever you want to call it, rotation, has kind of been working. Now, I'm still very much in the Rasheed Walker, Sean Ryan camp. I understand that Jon Runyan Jr. has given this team a lot of football. And just a couple of years ago, he played at a pretty high level along the offensive line. I think it's hard for coaches to just be like, all right, did this guy just forget how to play football? Like, how do you go from being good to just flat out being bad in just like a couple of years when you're still in the prime of your career? It's a contract year for Runyan. Like, you're just expecting, like, can he get out of this funk at some point and start playing good football? Hasn't been the case, but they're trying everything at this point. Like I said, I would go with Walker and Sean Ryan. If nothing else, if they're going to keep these competitions going, then like, put the competition in play in the first half. And by the second half, decide which one of those players at each one is playing better and ride the hot hand in the second half. There's been a couple of those games where Sean Ryan has looked really good. Like, just leave him in. Leave him in until you have to take him out and just see what happens. And like, maybe he puts together a few really good drives and he looks like the guy. That's awesome. If he doesn't, you can always go back to Jon Runyan Jr. at any point that you want. Or if Ryan comes out and he's just struggling, well, then stop the rotation. Just go with Runyan then. Whatever it is, who's ever winning that competition during the day of the game, just roll with it. There was a game a couple weeks ago, in fact, this last week as well, where Rasheed's playing pretty darn well. So in the second half, just keep playing Rasheed. And Sean Ryan, like I said, a couple games where he's playing really well, just keep playing Sean. And if it's reversed, great. If Yosh is playing great and Runyan's playing great, then ride the hot hand there as well. But I think that needs to be the next evolution of this. If they are going to keep it, is like, who's ever playing well, please just continue to play them in the second half. Why would Savage get the start over Owens or Johnson Jr.? Packer 3-0 when they have started. Well, Savage has been a first-round flop for 5 years now, probably the Packers' worst open field tackler in space. First of all, I do expect Savage to get the nod if he is healthy, but we don't know 1,000% for sure who's actually going to start until we see them out on the field. Could be Owens, could be Ford, could be Savage, could be Anthony Johnson Jr. We just don't know. Green Bay loves their experienced players. We see it with, Jon Runyan Jr. We see it with Darnell Savage. There's other case studies as well with this where they like going with the players that they have some familiarity with, for better or worse, and for sometimes for worse. One of the things that we don't always see is the communication that goes into these things. And according to Matt LaFleur, just in his press conference today, Darnell is a great communicator in the secondary. If that's the case, sometimes that can go a long way into helping a secondary, especially that has a ton of moving parts and these guys have not been playing together. That can help a secondary a lot in those situations. Josh Myers, well, I don't think he's playing particularly great. The coaching staff and GM have gone out of their way to saying he's playing his best football. I think a large part of that is the communication up front and the protections and the blitz pickups and everything like that along the offensive line that he brings to the table that we don't get to see. So just know, like, from our point of view, it can look like one thing. And from a coach's point of view in the building every single day, it can look totally different. And a lot of those variables, whether it be the communication, the checks, the audibles, the whatever it might be, those things are also extremely important. And we just don't know if, like, maybe one of the, like, Anthony Johnson Jr. is really struggling with that aspect of the game. Maybe Sean Ryan is. Maybe, like, who knows? We don't have the full equation in front of us to say this is how it should compute in the end. So I think at some point you have to give the coaches some benefit of the doubt. And like I said, we don't know for sure which safeties are starting. What I will say is, again, this is just per me, what I've done with my grading for these players at safety. The difference between Savage, Ford, Owens, and Anthony Johnson Jr. so far has been almost nothing. It's like slight negatives for all of them. So I really don't have a huge take one way or the other of which four should be, or which two of the four should be out there. I've said I would go Rudy Ford and Anthony Johnson Jr. if it were me. I think they're going to go Rudy Ford, Darnell Savage, but we're just going to have to wait and see, and then see how it plays out. And I'm sure they know they have, four players who have started for them. And if they need to go in a different direction, they have the ability to do so. All right, Omar, I might get back to you in a little bit, but I want to spread the love a little bit and get to some of these other questions. Ron Rad, great name. Why do our first round picks have to be projects? Was there anybody after number 17 that's had an immediate impact? I'm not sure if I'm forgetting something. I guess was because the pick this year was like 12, right? For LVN. And unless you're saying like number 17 being like Devontae Adams, but he was not, Green Bay hasn't had pick 17 in a while. So I'm assuming you mean pick 13 for LVN this year. So I'm going to go with that. Let me answer your first part of your question first. They don't have to be projects. I promise you that if Brian Gutekunst found a player that he thought was going to be able to come in and be a dominant player from day one, he would do that. He would just draft that player. Sometimes it's not that easy. And this is a draft and develop sort of philosophy that's been this way since Ron Wolf, with a little hiccup along the way in the Mike Sherman era. But from Ron Wolf, really going to Ted Thompson to Brian Gutekunst, and what you're looking for as a GM. All right, let me put this as simply as possible. It's great to draft good players. That's a good thing. But what you're looking at as a GM is you're trying to find home run players, especially in the first round of the draft, no matter how you can get them. Doesn't matter if it takes 2 or 3 years to develop them or if they're ready to be an all-pro right now. But winning in the NFL is predicated upon finding all-pro caliber players and having them be really the base and core and functionality of your team as these stars on your roster. You don't win in the NFL without a handful of guys that are just kind of pulling everything behind them, and meaning like they're the ones doing a huge portion of the work. So it's great to find good players. Nobody's going to be upset when you draft good players, but you need to find great players. It's going to be an interesting case study with this draft that we're talking about right now for Green Bay, where we've seen already a lot of really good football from these rookies, but do any of them have that all-pro ability down the road? That's what's going to need to be decided and sort of reviewed, but that's what you're looking for. So it doesn't necessarily matter if it's now or in 2 or 3 years. If they can develop into that all-pro level player, that's a home run for like the entire draft. And if you can find a guy like that and like a Pro Bowl caliber player in your draft, it doesn't matter if you found him in the first round, the 7th round, where you got them, undrafted free agent. If you can find a couple players like that in your draft, you've done remarkably well. So you're going a little bit big game hunting, especially in the first round. And Brian has done that. He has not shied away from taking some fairly high risk, high reward draft picks in the first round. Jaire Alexander, undersized, but had all the talent that he needed. That was a little bit of a home run swing, and it mostly has paid off. Although as of late, we haven't seen the same Jaire, and he's been banged up, but certainly early in his career, home run. Rashawn Gary was a home run swing. We've seen it with Jordan Love. That was a home run swing. Same thing with LVN, edge player, every single intangible and every single trait that you want as a player, just not quite there yet as a football player. But you're trying to find all pros that could maybe even get into, big time Hall of Fame level players. Those are the type of players that you're searching for. And in the first round, especially, sometimes you're willing to take a little bit more of a swing. Sometimes you're willing to take a little bit more of a gamble. Sometimes you're willing to take a little bit more of a developmental approach to try to find some of those guys, because if you find them and if you get them, it changes the course of your franchise entirely when you have those big time players. So that's where I'm at with it. And then there was a second part of this as well that I may have lost. Where did it go? Was there a player that was available after? So like after LVN, I'd have to go back and look at the entire draft, but he unfortunately got hurt halfway through the season. But 2 picks later, I believe it was Christian Gonzalez for the Patriots, who started off phenomenal for the Patriots at corner from day one. And unfortunately, like 5 weeks into the season, he suffered, I think, a season-ending injury, hadn't been able to play since then, but he was phenomenal. Broderick Jones, the offensive tackle and guard for the Steelers, they've used him in a variety of different ways. He's been really good from day one. So yeah, you could make an argument that if they went with a Broderick Jones or a Christian Gonzalez, who were picked right after, that like either of those guys would have been able to make a much bigger impact from day one. It might just be better players than LVN in day one. So yeah. And sorry, Omir, if I got the name wrong. I just think I saw that. Omer? No A. Okay. My apologies, Omer. All right. Walker and Nyman is working for sure. Good there. Yep. Cool with that. All right. Big Papa Penguin. Other than offensive line, what position group do you think needs a big revamp or influx of talent going into next year? You could look at safety first, right? Safety has Anthony Johnson Jr. and Zane Anderson under contract. So safety needs an influx of talent. And this is where like we can go through all of these, but this is where there's not many positions that are just like off the board right now. Probably if Jordan Love continues the way that he is, that's probably off the board high. Running back though, Dillon's a free agent, and Aaron Jones, either he's probably got 1 year left in Green Bay or his time in Green Bay is coming to end one way or the other. So running back is a position there. I don't think wide receiver and tight end need any influx of talent right now. I think you want to develop the players that you have there. And I think there's plenty of talent there. You just have to extract all of it. You mentioned offensive line. I still think defensive line, Kenny is getting up there, and I'm not in age, but in snaps and wear and tear on his body. And Slayton and Wyatt have been hit and miss. Carl Brooks looks promising. Even Colby Wooden looks promising. So I don't know that you need an influx of talent there, but if you got a big time defensive lineman, you certainly aren't going to be too upset with that. Edge is interesting as well because Preston Smith's time at some point in the next couple of years is probably coming to an end. LVN has not shown that he's like the guy yet, and Enigbari is a rotational player. So you kind of have Rashawn Gary and like hopes for LVN. Quay Walker has been up and down. Devondre's probably coming to an end. Isaiah McDuffie, I know there's differing feelings there, but you could still potentially use a player like that. And then corner, like Jaire has been constantly injured as of the past few seasons. Stokes, you have no idea at this point if he's ever going to reach the first round potential. Carrington Valentine you like, but then it's like Nixon's a free agent. I don't think you're, making any decisions based on Corey Ballantyne or Caillou Blue Kelly or Robert Rochelle or anyone else on the roster. So you can make an argument that they could use safety, corner, off-ball linebacker, edge, defensive line, offensive line, running back. Yeah, so just those positions. That's it. But if I had to say the biggest, I'd go safety after offensive line just because it's Anthony Johnson Jr. and nobody as of right now. Joseph surprised Zach Ertz when unclaimed. Our team's weary of his injury history, or is his salary too high? Afraid he will be back with Philly. I think, in those situations, a lot of times I'd have to look at exactly what it was from a dead or like a remaining salary standpoint. But usually they have some remaining salary where if they're claimed, it's a little bit more than teams want to spend at this point in the season. So they usually go unclaimed, and then you get him for like a vet minimum the remainder of the year. And then he kind of gets to choose his team too, which I'm sure his agent is putting out there of like, hey, we don't want to be claimed. We want to go and kind of shop ourselves around for the team that we think is going to be a best fit. So a lot of the times in those situations, those players do go unclaimed. And yeah, I think Philly could make a ton of sense with the experience that he has there, and just that, you can never have enough good tight ends. But I definitely think that fit would make a ton of sense. I don't expect him in any way, shape, or form to end up in Green Bay. Matthew, happy Friday to you too, my friend. Hi, Miranda. Who's been your favorite rookie receiver to watch so far this season out of Wicks, Reed, and Heath? It's been so fun to watch them progress. Appreciate the content you put out. Appreciate you as well, Miranda. Thanks so much for being here. Wicks has been my favorite to watch. I mean, and Jaden Reed, a very close second, right? Like Jaden Reed is super fun to watch. But I am a believer, and you've probably heard me say this over and over for those of you who've been, listeners for a while. I believe wide receiver is like a artistry position. It's a skilled craft. And your release game and your breaks at the cutoff point at the top of the route and your eyes and your ability to sell and just gain separation, that is what I love to see from a wide receiver, because you're not always going to be able to outrun everyone. You're not always going to be able to trick everyone with maybe some trick play or just scheme something up. You're not always going to be able to out jump or out physical a corner or a safety or whoever's guarding you. At some point, you've got to do your job as a beautiful route runner, separator, whatever it is, going into your release bag off the line of scrimmage to just find ways to gain space and get open. And those receivers are so valuable because you're not putting it in harm's way when you throw their way. If you're throwing like to a contested catch wide receiver, well, the other guy has the ability to contest it and make the catch too. And some of those can be tip balls. Look at the play to Christian Watson in the end zone a few weeks ago, where he throws it to Christian, Patrick Peterson tips it away, ends up in an interception. When you don't have a guy that's gaining easy separation, you're constantly putting the ball in harm's way. Now, whether that's a 5% chance or a 50% chance or whatever that is, it's still going to be there. There's always that possibility. But when you have a guy who can just pure separate at the top of the route and find space and just be open, man, does that make your offense so much easier. Is that such an amazing weapon for your quarterback? And it's just so valuable. Now, Wicks is going to have to prove that he can do it consistently and long-term. Teams are going to be more familiar with him as time goes on, and they're going to match him up in different ways. And then I think he has to come up with some of those plays too, where he had the bizarro fumble play, which it wasn't a great pass, but still you got to hold on to the football. He had a couple big drops in the past handful of weeks. So he needs to do that stuff well, but man, there's an upside for Dontavian Wicks that is pretty freaking special. And I can't wait to see. And I've talked about this play in the past too, but like I think it was the first day of training camp. Like he comes up and he clears Rudy Ford on a block. So it springs a big block. Like he's an intense blocker. He's a great route runner. He has good hands despite a couple of the drops already. I'm excited. And we saw the run after the catch where he like collided with the player, just bounced off and then accelerated quickly and got massive yards after contact. Like, whew, there's some really, really fun stuff there for Dontavian Wicks. So that's what I would have to go so far. But again, Jaden Reed right there. Kevin, do I think Kenny Clark, I'm going to get to the super chat in just a moment. Sorry about that. You think Kenny Clark has a big role on the team for 24-25 with his current salary? I do as of now. I do think Kenny stays for next year. The contract situations are really, really interesting with Devondre, Aaron Jones, Kenny Clark, Preston Smith. So many of those are like, you don't save a ton of money by going in a different direction, but you do get off of them fully after 2024 and they're no longer under, on the books in 2025 and beyond then. So there is an ability to kind of take your medicine and get off of those for 2025. So yeah, I don't know what they're going to do. Campbell seems like a more likely possibility to get released. Aaron Jones could be in that camp too. I think Clark and Preston are more likely to stay. I don't know. It's really, really interesting. And I'm very intrigued as to how Goot's going to treat that in the offseason. I'm sure as the offseason kicks off, we'll get into all of those decisions and discussions and what type of salary the team would save by going in those directions and things like that, just like we did with Rodgers and those type of guys last year. But it'll be a very interesting decision, but I would expect Kenny back in 2024 as of right now. Yeah, he's been playing absolutely fantastic. Spotted cow in Tennessee. Family brought some for Thanksgiving. Happy hour, baby. Love it. Enjoy your spotted cow, my friend. Yeah, I was a big Christian Gonzalez guy too. I mean, you do get to a point, right, where All right, you spent a first-round pick on Demarius Randall, a second-round pick on Josh Jackson, a first-round pick on Jaire Alexander, a first-round pick on Eric Stokes, basically a first-round pick, first pick in the second round on Kevin King. It's like you're taking a second-round pick on Quentin Rollins. Like it's like you're taking a first or second-round pick at a corner every single year, and it's not like you've had tremendous success with doing so. So, like at some point, you got to start pumping some, resources into other positions, but. I thought Gonzalez would be far gone by the time the Packers selected. All right, Spike Mocha, sorry for the wait here. We're the players who you pounded the table to draft that Green Bay didn't take and that have had the best careers and worst careers. Oh man. I always bring up Stephon Anthony. That was a guy I really loved in that specific draft. It's going to sound like hindsight, but I was a massive TJ Watt guy. And I thought for sure they were going to take TJ Watt, not to bring up this whole freaking discussion, but TJ Watt was so Clay Matthews. Like TJ Watt and Clay Matthews' career trajectories were almost like freaking identical. And I thought for sure when Green Bay had the opportunity to pull that trigger again and go with a very similar player, I'm like, it's the same type of guy, intense, wins in a variety of different ways. Like you could tell he was just starting to reach the peak of his powers. Neither of them knew what the heck they were doing in college, and they were still getting into the backfield, into the quarterback. Like it was the same career trajectory. Interestingly enough, in the Clay Matthews draft, I really liked Ray Malaluga, the inside linebacker, also from USC. I liked all three of those linebackers. It was Matthews, Malaluga, and Cushing in that draft. Liked all three. Clay obviously ended up being by far and away the best. I liked Malaluga a little bit more. I'm glad they went with Clay. So that was a miss. Loved Vonnie Holiday in the Vonnie Holiday draft. That was a long time ago. That's the Randy Moss draft. But yeah, Vonnie ended up being a phenomenal draft pick in and of himself. Those are some of the ones off the top of my head that I did really like. The Jaire Alexander pick. That was one I was excited about at the time. Yeah, I'd have to go back and really look at a variety of them. But there's certainly been things that I've been right on. There's certainly been things that I've been wrong on. And, it's kind of fun to go back and track some of those things through the years of the players you really liked that didn't turn out and the players that you, really loved and did, and vice versa. That's what makes the draft part of it so incredibly fun, is you kind of get to track that over the years and see where your hits and misses are. And then you try to learn from them. I talk about Stephon Anthony all the time because those type of players were players that gave me a lot of problems, because you watch them in college. You watch these off-ball linebackers. They would line up almost like over corner, like just so far out. And then they just rally to the football with their speed and athleticism. And they didn't have to take on blocks. They didn't have to use any sort of instincts. And like the Miles Jacks of the world, the Jalen Smiths, and obviously Jalen's had a lot to do with his injury, but Miles Jacks, Jalen Smith, Stephon Anthony's, a lot of those off-ball linebackers that played that specific role in college that are Ryan Shazier, although he was good. That's an interesting name to bring up this week. But those guys were good, but never really lived up to their college hype. And obviously, again, Shazier had the massive injury as well. Even Miles Jack had some injury issues, but those guys didn't turn out the way that you kind of hoped and expected them to. So you kind of have to recalibrate and then go like, all right, some of the more physical linebackers, some of the more instinctual linebackers, those are the ones that are succeeding. We'll see Quay, because Quay's kind of one of those flow to the football speed guys that doesn't like taking on a ton of blocks, doesn't play with great instincts. Usually those guys don't turn out great. Hopefully Quay does, and hopefully you can kind of learn some of those things moving forward. Alex, thanks so much for the super chat. Clark versus Creed Humphrey is a big matchup to watch, big time. I mentioned that in the preview episode with Perry and Alex that's my favorite matchup to watch in this game. Also with Thuney at left guard versus Kenny Clark as well. Those are the type of just like heavyweight fights. If you're a AEW or WWE fan, where you get like the big, just Haas versus Haas fights, whether it was, what was the one at All Out? Was it Miro versus Powerhouse Hobbs? And then you've got the Sheamus and Gunther matches. Like you get some of those and it's just huge physical guys colliding and it's so much freaking fun. Welcome to Creed Humphrey and Joe Thuney versus Kenny Clark. Should be a really fun matchup this week. Andy just wanted to drop a super chat for your work, especially for your Mike Wall and Justice Mosqueda shows. Really great analysis. Thank you, Carl. Super kind of you. Thank you so much. I am the one that is blessed that gets to chat with those amazing people every single week. Perry, Alex, Mike, Carmen's got a great episode tomorrow, by the way. Make sure to check that one out. That was a lot of fun recording with her this week. Obviously, Sam Munson, just everyone, Paul Brettel, and then just all of our awesome guests on the regular, Monday through Sunday Pack-A-Day podcast audio channel as well. It's just the most amazing group of people. Love chatting with them every week, and so glad that we get to do it and kind of bring some of their awesome ideas and content. And as I always say, all of those different guests have very different backgrounds and viewpoints. Some, obviously, Sam's a national guy. Carmen's an NFC North girl or whatever, analyst. We've got all different viewpoints, bloggers, Packer people, Packer fans, non-Packer fans. And you just sort of get hopefully a well-rounded overall viewpoint of the Packers when you've got all those different voices. And it's funny sometimes because people will be like, well, I don't like this specific guest. Like you could, get somebody else. And then like another person is like, that is my favorite guest. I love them. And what I think people don't understand, same thing with the audio podcast every single week. Like, I don't expect you to necessarily always love every single one. Some of them might be your cup of tea and some of them might not. But having that wide range of views is just, for me, it's beneficial to get to see what a former Packer and Mike Wall is thinking of how this team is performing. And Justice has just such an awesome mind for all this stuff. And like just all of them. It's so fun to get all their viewpoints, and it certainly shapes what I'm seeing because I get to see it through all of their, different viewpoints as well. So I love it, but I'm glad that some of you guys are enjoying it as well. Roberto, I was thinking about this today. Matt had an interesting question. Like just when he was asked about Jaire and the injury today, it was almost like Matt was like, I don't know, like, and I'm sure it's probably mostly frustrated with the injury, but it was just like the way he kind of answered it. And Jaire has not played well in the games that he has been in this year. Like just flat out, he has not played well at all. Part of that is probably due to some of the injuries that he has had going on, but he has not been the same. And he's also had a ton of injuries. He's got a big contract. Jaire would be one where like, if some team comes calling and is like, hey, we'll give you a first and third for Jaire, and just kind of going off his priors and like what he did previously, and like we can make him an all-pro corner again, like I would probably take that in a second if I were Green Bay and start, building that room. The other thing is like, even when Jaire is Jaire, right? Like even when he's phenomenal as a shutdown corner, clearly he's worth every penny still, but like there's still a huge gap in his run defense at this point. And even when you start looking, like I've talked about this week with like Carrington Valentine, who's also struggled in run defense a lot. Like, can you have Jaire and Valentine out there at the same time? And if all of a sudden you do realize that Valentine's one of your starters, that becomes an issue too. Like the whole thing's very interesting to me. As of now, I fully expect Jaire to be on the 2024 roster. How we want to determine long-term in the NFL is always tough to say, but I don't see Jaire going anywhere in the near future. But it's just something that's kind of been in the back of my mind of like, I'm not totally convinced that it's like completely out of the question that maybe Jaire could end up somewhere else in like the right set of circumstances and scenarios. It's an interesting one though. Jean-Marc, thank you so incredibly much. That is super kind of you. Appreciate everything you do. If J-Love continues to play at his current level, does he get a new contract before the end of the season? Great question. I have not vetted this out, although I'm going to trust my good friend Ken Ingalls on this one. And I think Jason Wilde, I saw somebody post, maybe looked into this as well. Apparently, he cannot sign his contract until I think it was May of next year. There's like a period of time when you sign that initial extension where if you sign another extension, you can't get more money, which of course J-Love's going to get more money if he signs a new extension. So it sounds like they're going to have to wait until like May of next year. So on one hand, it's kind of nice for Green Bay that his agent and Jordan can't just be like, hey, I want a new contract right now. They literally can't. And I think that might be a nice part of it, where Green Bay kind of gets this entire time frame just to view Jordan in this vacuum and make that analysis and evaluation without having to even think about, should we do a contract right now? Like maybe we should get this done sooner rather than later. I think that might end up being a positive. Now, if they were thinking right now of like, hey, maybe we should talk to Jordan and his agent and try to get a contract done like before he blows up and gets an extra $12 million per season. Then maybe their hands are a little bit tied and maybe they should have left themselves some outs and able to do that. And to be clear, there's always a loophole that like the insane salary cap experts in the NFL can seemingly find from time to time. So maybe if they want to get it done, they can find that loophole somehow. But per Ken, and I think per some other reporting out there, doesn't sound like they're actually going to be able to do it until May. So either way, probably at this point, let the rest of the season play out, see how he performs, and then have that conversation in the offseason when you're probably able to do that. Yes, Lily's the best. I've had the opportunity to work with Lily a lot in the past. We worked on Green Bay Nation together previously. One of the absolute best, nicest, awesomest people in the entire world. And anytime I get to work with Lily, it's an absolute joy. So I was glad to be able to talk with her this week as well. Bex, good to see you, my friend. If Joe Barry had the 2010 Packers defensive roster, would it be better, worse, or the same? It would be different. It's so hard to say because like when you start doing different eras, like this style of defense didn't even exist at that time. It'd be interesting. It'd be a really fun case study because they'd be running like a futuristic defense against the, in 2010, this type of, the teams didn't play this style of defense. So they would be doing something different than the rest of the league. At the same token, like it is really, really hard to put together a bad defense with Colin Jenkins and BJ Raji and Clay Matthews and Desmond Bishop, Tramon Williams, Sam Shields, Charles Woodson, Nick Collins on your defense. I'm pretty sure there are people in this chat that could be like a top 15 defense as defensive coordinator of the Green Bay Packers that year with that defense. I mean, Charles Woodson, we won't get into it right now. I can't even begin to describe to you how big of a cheat code that he was in that era of that defense. And Dom was ahead of his time playing like base nickel, where other teams were still kind of playing a lot of just regular base defenses. And he said, no, I'm going to play base nickel. And the reason he could do that was because Charles Woodson was a hybrid outside linebacker / slot corner / shutdown corner / safety. You could do anything with him. And it basically what it amounted to, right? Look at it this way. When you had your nickel defense in, you had Colin Jenkins and BJ Raji on the interior. And then you had Clay Matthews and Frank Zombo as your outside linebackers with Bishop and what was it, AJ Hawk at inside linebacker. I think it was Hawk they had Hawk, Bishop, Chiller, and Barnett, and two of them got hurt and two of them didn't. I think it was Hawk and Bishop that didn't. And I think it was Barnett and Chiller that got hurt. But so you got Hawk and Bishop and your inside linebackers. And then you've got Charles Woodson in the slot, right? So that plays like if they come out in 11 personnel, they got 3 corners. All right, well, we've got Charles in the slot. We've got Sam Shields and Tramon on the outside. We've got Nick Collins and Charlie Pepper deep. Collins can be flying everywhere, and Pepper is just kind of going to be our guy chilling out way deep and kind of being our last line of defense. Like, amazing. But if they decide, like the other team decides like, hey, no, we're not going to go 11. We're going to go power. We're going to see we're going to go heavy personnel. We're going to see what you can do with this, 5 defensive back. All right. Well, basically Frank Zombo in that situation becomes like your 3rd defensive lineman. Remember, he's a bigger guy. So now it's like you've got Jenkins, Raji, and Zombo as your 3, interior players, with Clay Matthews and Charles Woodson goes from corner to basically being like an off-ball linebacker with still Bishop and Hawk as your off-ball linebackers. Like, because of Charles Woodson, you are in base and in nickel at the same time. He was a freak. So to me, it probably still would have been really freaking good. They had too many amazing players on that defense to be bad, but Dom ran it really well that season. That team was amazing, and that defense was really, really fun. So it would have been interesting, but Barry probably finds a way to still be successful because that defense was unbelievable. All right, we got to get John out of here, huh? All right, see you later, John. All right, Ian. If not too personal, do you pay Sam Monson to come on? Love your talks with him. As always, thanks for all you do, Andy. You're the best in the business. Ian, I won't talk about pay for any Pack-A-Day podcast people one way or the other. So I'll just leave it at that. But I appreciate the kind words. And like I said, I'm just blessed to get to talk to all of the different people that I get to talk to on a almost daily basis. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I will say there's a lot of really cool synergies before it, like with Justice being able to do a co-branded with Acme Packing, and they can post it on their site and we get to post it on Pack-A-Day. And with Paul Brettel, they get to post it on Packers Wire and we get to post it on Pack-A-Day. And so there's a lot of really fun, different synergies that go into that. Obviously Cheesehead TV and us are very, very close into a lot of different, stuff as well. So there's a lot of cool things that go into that, but not gonna go too far into that. Vex Woodson was the best player I've ever seen. He's an absolute freak. He was so fun to watch. I've said this before, but like there was like a pinch me moment where like the first couple of years of Charles, because remember Charles had some weirdo, bizarro years in Oakland where like didn't really do a whole heck of a lot. Then he signs this massive contract in Green Bay and he comes over and like all of a sudden you're like a couple of years into the Charles Woodson thing and you're like, man, like you almost had to like, for me, I almost had to like pinch myself and be like, man, Charles freaking Woodson is on this team and he is dominating defensive player of the year, like stuff. It was so fun to watch. It just absolutely so fun to watch. Generational, agreed. Joseph, you want to talk some Brewers? I'll go out of my element just a little bit. How exciting is it for the Brewers to soon get Churio under contract for 8 to 10 years? Which other young outfielder gets dealt to make room? I have no idea on the second part of that, so I will leave that alone. But I do really like Milwaukee doing this type of thing. When you're a small market team, you have to think outside the box and you have to try things that other teams aren't doing. And if you can lock up what could be a generational player on a cheaper deal by doing it sooner, awesome stuff. If it doesn't work out, like what is it, like 80 million? Like that's like a write-off for most baseball teams anyway. Like the risk reward is totally fine. I love the deal from Milwaukee and hopefully it pays off huge. Andy, who would you match up with Kelce, and are you ready for the MVS drops? It would be very fitting if MVS just caught everything coming his way, deep ball after deep ball, doesn't drop a thing all game long. That would be the Green Bay luck of things sometimes. There's no perfect matchup for Travis Kelce. There just isn't. You are hoping and praying and, just kind of doing your best to hold on for dear life against Travis Kelce. You can't take him out of the game. I think you got to double him in some key situations, bracket him. What I like is maybe you can take a Quay Walker, a Devondre Campbell, or somebody, Preston Smith even, and put him on Preston Smith Island. That's the Preston Penitentiary, as I like to call it. But jam him with somebody, right? Just get him off of his route and his timing with Mahomes, and just kind of hopefully that like just throws him off a little bit, and then let that player either spy Mahomes after he did it. So like you could have Quay jam Kelce and just disrupt everything, then go and spy Mahomes. Well, then a safety or a different linebacker or a corner takes Kelce from there. There's just like you have to be multiple with what you're doing. There's no one player. There's not a linebacker, a corner, or a safety on this roster that's capable, or like basically in the NFL, that's capable of shutting down Travis Kelce. So you got to try different things. You got to switch it up. You got to throw curveballs at Mahomes so that when it looks like Kelce's going to be open, he's doubled. And when it looks like he's doubled, he's actually singled. And you just got to change things up and kind of, like I said, hope and pray for the best. Pacheco has looked good. He's a fun running back. I mean, you just love the play style that he plays with, like the ability to break tackles, play physical, run through contact. He's a complete energizer for that offense. Like when he gets going, it's big time. Not to spoil the preview show too much, but I talked a lot about the running backs and the running games in this one because of all the other stuff that people are talking about. Watch for the running games in this one because it could completely change the complexity of this game one way or the other. Nate, hey, I never catch you live. Happy to be here. NFC playoff picture. It looks great after the Seahawks L. Yeah. Like it's basically pretty easy. They go 6-0. They're 100% in. They go 5-1. They're 99.9% in. They go 4-2. They're like 80 to 85% in. They go 3-3 and they're going to need a lot of help. Like it's basically as much as we want to watch the other teams at this point. I will tell you, like it's just in Green Bay's hands right now. Go 6-0, 5-1, and probably even 4-2, and you're in. Go 3-3. You need a lot of help. Go 2-4 or anything worse, and you're not going to make it. So Green Bay has, do you want to gamble Green Bay or not? Because if you don't want to gamble, go, win 5 or more games. If you want to gamble, win 4 or 3. And if you just don't want to make the playoffs, then win 2, 1 or 0 games. But how can you not be excited about this team and just the fact that we are into December? It is December 1st. And this team that they really kind of pulled apart at the seams in certain spots. I mean, just going like from Aaron Rodgers and shipping him to New York and moving on from a lot of veterans and going to be the youngest team in football. and still being super competitive going into December with a better than a coin flip's chance of making the playoffs. Awesome. Absolutely awesome. All right, Tim O'Neill. Do you think the Packers defense being 10th in points per game is a bit of a fool's gold? For comparison, they are 15th in EPA per play and 18th in DVOA. I think yes, right? I think they haven't had the toughest schedule in the world. I'm so at a loss, and I've talked about this a little bit in the past, for how to evaluate this Packers defense in totality. I think you can make a strong argument that the 10th best defense, or even maybe like the 15th in EPA per play, is a little bit of fool's gold because of some of the opponents that they've played. I think you can also make the argument that just the fact that they are 18th in DVOA, 15th in EPA, and 10th in points per game, regardless of the opponents that they've played, is actually pretty impressive for this defense. Rashawn is amazing. And then that's kind of it for when it comes to amazing players on defense. Arguably, your next best defensive player on the season was sent to Buffalo at the trade deadline. You have safeties that have had to fill in. You've started 4 different safeties. Corey Ballantyne, a guy that was chilling on the practice squad as a potential special teams call-up at most, has started a ton at corner for you. Keyshawn Nixon, a special teams star in his career, is starting in his first season as a true defensive player. You've been missing Jaire Alexander for a massive part of the year. Eric Stokes has yet to play on defense. LVN has not come in and be this huge impact first-round edge player. Devondre Campbell has missed like half the season. Quay Walker missed like 4 games at inside linebacker. Isaiah McDuffie has played a ton. Devontae Wyatt and TJ Slayton have been okay, but have not made this like huge jump where they're like dominating players to tag team with Kenny Clark. Kenny Clark's been good, but is still not dominant Kenny Clark from a handful of years ago when he was in his prime. Preston Smith has been good, but is not like prime dominating Preston Smith like he was in his first year as a Green Bay Packer either. I don't care. And some people might say, well, it's because they're not using them there. I disagree. I don't think there's any different way that you could be using these players than what they're being used as. And they're all in the right spots in the right positions. I don't see it any differently. I don't think that this has been a team that's just stacked with defensive talent, despite, I will say this, I think the issues on defense are more injury related and more like they spent some of the wrong top tier draft picks on the wrong defensive players than it is just on Joe Barry. So it doesn't pass the eye test for me. There are situational points in the game where it feels totally tone deaf by Joe Barry of what he's trying to do in certain situations, and that is frustrating. The game plan against Pittsburgh was embarrassing. There's things like that that are clearly just don't pass the eye test. So this is not me saying like, man, let's get Joe Barry his gold jacket and like sign him to a 10-year extension. I don't believe that. But I do think that there is, as is usually the case, somewhere in the middle where it's not as good as maybe a top 10 defense in scoring shows it to be, but I don't think it's anywhere near as bad or egregious as the outpouring of this guy's the effing worst, fire him into the sun. I think it's actually been a mostly admirable job that he's done so far. Now, could the Chiefs throw 70 on him tomorrow, or Sunday? Sure. Like who knows? We'll see. But he actually had a really good game plan and game against the Chiefs the last time these two teams played each other. So we'll see. Like I said, I just think the answer is somewhere in the middle. Now, if you still want to make the argument that it's better for them to go in a different direction, I understand that. I would not have brought Joe Barry back this year. I would have gone in a different direction. I think they needed something a little bit different. But like I said, I'm not to the point where it's as good as the numbers say. I'm not as to the point where I think it's as bad as everyone just wanting to run him out of town at this point. Vikings game is the most essential and got to win it. And the Bears. Yeah. Vikings game, definitely 1A. If you could win one game the remainder of this year and just mark it down as a win right now, you would choose the Vikings. If you had to lose one game the remainder of this year, the nice thing is it's the Chiefs. That's the one game. They're an AFC team. It's not going to change any playoff tiebreakers or anything like that. It's the best case scenario. So the hardest team they play remaining on their schedule is actually the best game to lose if they had to lose one. It's better if they just won every game, but if you had to lose one, you would handpick KC as the one that you'd want to lose. Wade, do we pretend to have a running attack or just throw to everyone? I think at minimum, they're going to pretend to have a running game, but they need to find some semblance, because if they don't have a running game, then you're just in a shootout. Like, you don't want a Jordan Love, Patrick Mahomes shootout. You don't want an anyone Patrick Mahomes shootout. Like, you don't want this just comes down to an arms race. So I think it's imperative that Green Bay finds some way to run the football in this game and get something going in some capacity. Vex, haven't we given up 200 plus rushing yards 3 times? Yep. Yes. At least I think it's been 3. It's been 2 or 3. Yeah. Again, I'm not making the argument. In the run defense, if you want to look at stats, the run defense is like 28th, 29th in the NFL, and they're giving up, I think, it's ugly. So again, I'm not saying that this is a perfect defense. I'm just saying that I don't think it's quite as bad as people think, and I don't think it's quite as good as some of the numbers might show. U.S. Sports Card says, A.J. Dillon done enough to be re-signed as a Green Bay Packer. I think this is going to come down to value. And I think it might come down to what might happen with Aaron Jones and just kind of the running back position in general. My gut is that teams are seeing what Miami's done and just saying, we want as much speed as possible at all of these positions. And I think Green Bay is going to want some more speed at that running back position. That's my guess. Now, if Jones isn't back, I could see maybe Dillon being more of a, like, somebody that they just want to bring back for some consistency standpoint, pass protection, those sort of things. But I think this mostly comes down to contract. If A.J. Dillon's willing to stay in Green Bay, team-friendly deal, loves Door County, loves the Packers, wants to stay here, I think he could be back. I think that's a legitimate possibility. If Green Bay decides that Aaron Jones is sticking around and Dillon wants to go get the best contract possible, I think that probably comes somewhere else. So to me, that question comes down to value overall. Green Ranger's making some predictions. What was Green Ranger? What was the bet? I have a question for you. I think this is the first time I've done this. I think it's the first time I've thrown a question back to somebody. Which version of Tommy in the Power Rangers was the best version of Tommy? Was it the Gold Ranger, the Green Ranger, or the White Ranger? Throw that one back at you, my friend. I guess I can tell which one you're going to say as your avatar is the Green Ranger, but rank them 1 through 3 for me of which one is your best version of Tommy. Feel sick yesterday rooting for the Cowboys. There are always some strange bedfellows this time of year. Cheering for the Bears against the Vikings. Tough pill to swallow. Now, it's just easy to cheer against the Vikings more than it is for the Bears. There's also a little bit of like, well, if the Bears win, at least they lose some of their draft position. It's not like they're in any position to like get back in a playoff conversation or anything. So that one's a little bit easier, but yeah, there's always some few weird bedfellows this time of year. Oh, so Green Ranger thinks that the White Ranger is better than the Green Ranger. I would not have expected that. So unless I missed the Green Ranger one, I don't know. Either way, this is probably the best response. Yeah, we've probably spent already too much time going over the Power Rangers in this chat. All right. In your opinion, why is there a public perception that Brian Gutekunst is not a good, smart GM and Joe Douglas is a genius GM? I personally don't agree with this or find this evaluation to be fair. Richard, I think we can all agree that a certain ESPN talk show host was a little bit biased on his friendship with a certain former Packers quarterback going into that discussion. I think any reasonable evaluation of Joe Douglas and Brian Gutekunst puts Brian well ahead of where Joe Douglas is. Let me just put it this way. If you're the GM that needs to do everything in his power to mortgage the future, to save his job, to go out and get a 40-year-old quarterback and all of his friends to try to save where your team is headed because you did a lot of wrong things, including drafting Zach Wilson with the 2nd overall pick, who can't even be a good number 3 quarterback at this point, that's probably the worst GM in that situation. Like, you already know if one of them's trading out of a place of, oh, we've got 2 quarterbacks, we could go in a couple different directions here, and the other one is desperate and willing to do anything for a 40-year-old quarterback, the one that's desperate's the worst of those two GMs. Spoiler. So I'll put it that way. All right. That makes more sense, Green Ranger. Appreciate you as well. All right, a couple more, and then I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to make sure I just hit all of the super chats before, because this usually happens to me where I missed a couple. See Jaire long term. Fool's Gold. Yes. Oh, Ian, missed this one. Glad I double checked. Does Joe Barry's contract expire after 2023? I have not seen anything. Those contracts are always tough to find. Just checking here. I don't know if somebody wants to look into this a little bit more in the chat. I don't know off the top of my head. Yeah, those are always tough ones. And sometimes those contracts get extended too without like any notice of it whatsoever. So it, as far as I know, I don't know is where I'm at right now. Maybe somebody in chat knows if Goody's contract set, or sorry, if Barry's contract set to expire, but it's possible. I just haven't seen anything that's reported that. Goody is a savant in the best way possible. He makes all the unpopular decisions that make sense to fans 2 years after the fact. Like a good father, you can't always give the kids what they want. It's a good way of putting it. GM's a thankless job. GMs are tasked with looking 2, 3, 4 years in advance, and fans want everything right now. Like if anything goes wrong, it's a nightmare. It's a hard way to live. Like you've got to be on a totally different timeline and look out for totally different things as a GM than what most of the coaching staff, most of the players, most of the fans, and most everyone wants. It is a long-term approach for a GM, a short-term approach for pretty much everyone else. So sometimes it is a very thankless job. US Sports Cards, this will be my most easy answer to any question that I've ever given in the history of my chat. I have 0.00% concern that any opposing teams are watching my shows as research on the Green Bay Packers. If they are, I have 0.0% concern that that team is a team to be worried about as a serious threat to what Green Bay is doing in any capacity. If they're looking to me to be their guiding light on what's, how they should go about beating the Packers or anything, they are doing things very wrong, because they should have a very smart, analytically driven scouting staff that is putting together those things in insane detail and is getting paid very well to do so. So no, I have no concern over that. Now, I do believe that there are probably opposing scouts and maybe even GMs that may follow on Twitter when I do all of my training camp observations of, like, especially for the ones that are closed to the public and those sort of things, that I think there is at least some likelihood that there are opposing eyes on those sort of things, because it's just information that you can't get. And I think even Daniel Jeremiah, I forget who it was. There was somebody that I was listening to of like, where they would, follow teams like beat writers or things like that to see like, all right, which of the players were maybe the players that were getting a lot of buzz in that training camp. And then maybe they would spend a little bit more time on those players. So that I think is possible. But if they're coming to my stuff for like an inside scoop on how to beat the Packers, no, we're probably good. The Packers are probably going to beat that team if it is. Bukowski has said that the contract is set to end after the season. All right, then that's definitely possible. In hindsight, would you want JT over Watson? Why? Oh, Jonathan Taylor over Watson. I think this one is a little bit overblown, because while there is reporting that when the Packers were interested in Jonathan Taylor, that the Colts were asking for Christian Watson, what we don't know is, and usually is the case in these situations, was it like, hey, we'll give you Jonathan Taylor for Christian Watson and a first-round pick, or we'll give you Jonathan Taylor and a fifth-round pick for Christian Watson. Like, we don't know on the outside of that what the other parameters of the deal was. If we're assuming that it was flat out, Jonathan Taylor for Christian Watson, 1-for-1. Certainly at the time, I would never have done that based on what Watson did in his first season. And like the worst thing that could happen is Watson goes on to be a top tier wide receiver and you end up with a really great running back, maybe even one of the best running backs for like a few years. And then like the running backs, like they just don't have longevity. Right. So never in a million years would I have done it. Even when I heard it at the time of like, if it was straight up Jonathan Taylor for Christian Watson, I would have kept Watson at the time. In the benefit of hindsight, it's more interesting. I don't believe that Green Bay's offensive line can run block for maybe anyone outside of like prime Barry Sanders. I don't know how much Jonathan Taylor would have mattered. Knowing that Jones got hurt and some of those things, do I think the team maybe would have been a little bit better? Also knowing that Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, and some of these guys came along pretty quickly. It's definitely more of a conversation now than it was at that point. I still think I'm not ready to give up on Christian Watson. And if I'm looking at like that next potential window where Green Bay could be really good, maybe 2, 3, 4 years down the road, Christian Watson still plays better in that window for me than what I think Jonathan Taylor does. So it's an interesting conversation, but at the time, I 1,000,000% would not have done it. Richard, I have no idea. That's a great question. If I had to build an all-time Packers meme team, which players would you choose for each position? Quarterback, The Laser Show, Tim Boyle. Running back, Najee Davenport. Wide receiver, you got to go Jake Kumaro. Tight end, and I guess it's like more of like an all like cult hero / team, maybe a little bit. Tight end, Tom Crabtree. Offensive lineman, David Bakhtiari. Defensive lineman, Latroy Guyan. Who was the player who was it? Oh, tight end might have to be. All right, we're going 2 tight end sets. Was it Andrew Corliss who hid behind a tree when there was like a bush when there was like some sort of drug bust and he like hid behind a tree? Whoever that is has got to be in that conversation. Defensive line. I don't know. I might have to come back to that one. I might have to just go Gilbert Brown just because he's what a character at defensive line, just a gravedigger in and of himself. Off-ball linebacker, I'm going Spencer Havner. Outside linebacker, Frank Zombo. Corner, might have to come back on that one. Safety, Atari Bigby. And then at corner, I'll go Baoju. What a great Baoju. How can you not like Baoju? So yeah, that's my all meme / cult hero / just great offensive line team. Or offensive and defensive team. You get my point. Chiefs recently cut Keontae Ingram today. Do you think that the Packers should have looked to sign him given the state of the running back room? I'll say this. If they would have had any interest whatsoever, they just would have claimed him off of waivers and put him on the team immediately because like they don't have running backs, right? So the fact that they didn't think that he was better than Patrick Taylor or James Robinson kind of tells me all I need to know that we're probably okay without Keontae Ingram on the roster. Preston Smith, corner, Ladarius Gunter. Like, all right, we're going to end with Ladarius Gunter because why the heck not? It's Friday. What more could you possibly want? Ladarius Gunter is one of those players that gets way too much hate. Ladarius Gunter as an undrafted free agent, if he could have stayed as the number 4 or 5 corner, was an awesome find. That was a really good player that they got as an undrafted free agent that if he could have stayed as, like I said, your number 4, number 5, number 6 corner, that's unbelievable. That's great value. They did so good. If Ladarius Gunter is your number 1 corner, some things have gone wrong and he never should have been put in that position in the first place. So yeah, Ladarius Gunter, number 1 corner. Yeah, that's not great. That Ladarius Gunter sucks. I don't want anything to do with that. But Ladarius Gunter, the number 4, 5, 6 corner, man, that dude was good. And it just sucks that he had to play number 1 corner and like have some ridiculous assignments that he never should have had to have been given. Jeremy Kapanos. All right, friends, you guys are the absolute best. I love the ridiculous questions. We talked, by the way, Power Rangers today, AEW, WWE, all Packers meme team, Ladarius Gunter. What more could you possibly want? I just guaranteed that your weekend is off to a great start. So check out the YouTube subscriptions, memberships, etc. If you're not signed up yet, awesome opportunity, fun stuff. Did an all new members only video today, going over players that are trending up, players that are trending down, and just kind of who's playing the best and worst over the past 4 weeks as well. So fun episode there. You get a live Q&A to do this with just our members every single week, an additional Q&A that's out there. Plus a ton of other stuff that's available. You get first access to videos. So a lot of time, like right now, Carmen's video for Saturday is up for all members. Right now, Alex and Perry's pregame show for Sunday is up for all members. Today, that stock report video is up for all members. So go sign up and you get a ton of extra content. And again, first look at just about everything. Also, Saturday night, 7 p.m., Badger State Brewery. I will be live, Q&A, meet and greet, whatever we want to make it. I'll be having a beer, watching the Big Ten championship game, meeting with Packer fans, and hopefully having a blast. So check that out, 7 p.m. tomorrow, Saturday, at Badger State Brewery in Green Bay. Can't wait to do that and hope to see some of you guys there. Have an amazing, amazing weekend. Thank you for allowing me this platform to do this. I will see you guys soon. Enjoy the game this weekend. Enjoy your weekend and go Pack Go.